Despite the recent turbulence in the Destiny news, Season 23 of Destiny 2 kicks off later this month, and as always, alongside new content there will be a host of gameplay changes and updates, some of which have yet to be revealed, so be sure to hit that subscribe button for more news shortly. Although Bungie have now confirmed that Season 23 will be called Season of the Wish, and they posted the key art for this just yesterday on Twitter. We can see obviously there will be an Awoken/Dreaming City theme, and it would appear as well that Riven will play a role in this one, and naturally we've got Awoken themed armor and weapons including Wish Ender in that key art right there. And so the Season of the Wish theme has now been revealed, and of course there'll be plenty more bits of info we'll get before the launch of Season 23. However, for today we're going to break down all of the upcoming weapon changes for the incoming season, and that includes teasers for new weapons, where we've got some info on new ritual weapons, but also we have a lot of weapon buffs as well as some nerfs which will affect entire archetypes. There are some big exotic reworks inbound, as well as general tuning, perk changes, and updates to how some rewards are acquired. So we're going to round up all of the changes related to weapons today as a recap ahead of the new content drop. And if you enjoyed the video, a rating below really is appreciated. Plus, let us know which weapons you're most excited to pick up. But otherwise, let's get into it. Of course, we'll see a bunch of new activity rewards, the seasonal suite of weapons for activities, exotics, rituals, and more. But on top of that, Bungie have specifically confirmed that we're going to see a new Strand Pulse Rifle as the new competitive division reward. So while we've had Mercurial Overreach featured for a couple of seasons now, that will finally be replaced by a new Strand Pulse, which is interesting. And Bungie haven't outlined specific Pulse Rifle changes for PvP, but in PvE, there will be increasing damage against minor red bar and major orange bar combatants by 12.5%. So while that isn't an absolutely massive buff, it certainly is going to make a difference inside of harder content, Grandmasters and things like that. Plus, we should also keep in mind that that is a generic change to damage, so of course it affects legendary weapons, but it'll also have an influence on exotics like Outbreak Perfected, and weapons like Revision Zero, which Bungie have confirmed has a separate change where they're increasing damage versus champions by 100%. And so between that, the other exotic options, and the general legendary archetypes, including the new Strand Pulse Rifle that we'll get for competitive, it's certainly going to be worth taking some Pulse Rifles for a spin starting in Season 23. Up next though, one of the biggest reworks for weapons next season will include glaives. And Bungie say they want to combat the issue where glaive projectiles are too slow, as well as the element of them feeling underpowered compared to other special ammo options. So they're increasing projectile speed by 30%, as well as projectile damage in PvE, which increases by 25%. And so those projectiles are going to connect with targets more easily, but also, when they do, we're going to get more damage. So that's awesome for PvE, but inside of PvP content, they're decreasing projectile damage on aggressives, which go to 125, adaptives will do 113, and rapid fires will do 101. So they will be brought down a little bit inside of PvP, but they also want to target problems with the long delay between firing projectiles and being able to melee combatants, so they're reducing the delay after firing before you can melee from 0.75 seconds to 0.2 seconds. And so follow-up melees should be relatively instant now. And there are also changes to shields, and they've made shield energy now recharge passively when the glaive is held at a rate of 1% per second. Plus glaive shield resistance will be tiered inside of PvP, so base glaive shield damage resistance remains at 50%, but damage resistance against primary ammo weapons and melee attacks has been reduced to 30%. And so those will affect all glaives in the game, including exotics, but Bungie have additional changes for exotics specifically. And firstly, there is Winterbite, and they're increasing the detonation damage of the large projectile by 25%. That's certainly a good increase. And the self-damage blast radius has been halved, as well as a reduction in the actual damage amount. So between the general changes and the buff to that projectile damage, Winterbite will certainly feel much better than it does at the moment. Plus Bungie have outlined additional changes to class glaives, so these are the ones we got back in Witch Green, and changes that will affect all of them include that they'll grant 1 ammo when you activate the perk, so even if they're out of ammo at the time, activating the exotic bonus will grant ammo. Plus they'll no longer passively drain shield energy when you special reload to activate the perk, and bonuses are no longer deactivated by reloading or stowing the weapon. So those are positive changes there, and then there are specific reworks for each of the glaives. So for the Edge of Intent for Warlocks, they're changing the effect of the healing turret projectiles to grant cures and provide restoration. They're also increasing the AoE radius to 8 meters, which will benefit more nearby allies, and increasing the magazine size from 4 to 5. So among the other glaive changes, that could feel pretty good. Then for the edge of action for Titans, they've said that passing through the bubble now grants bonus reload speed, handling, and a small amount of stacking bonus damage, in addition to the overshield. And so the mini bubble that creates will now provide quite a few more benefits, although they have said they've reduced the health of the bubble from 8,000 to 2,500 to account for the increased uptime and improved effects. So the bubble will be easier to destroy, but the benefits that it will grant are infinitely improved. Then for the edge of concurrence, the Hunter Glaive, the Lightning Seeker will now jolt targets on impact, which will certainly open up a bunch of possibilities with arc effects, although they have reduced the direct hit damage of Lightning Seeker to account for the free ammo granted. So if you're a fan of glaives already, they're only going to get better, although if you're one of those players that doesn't really use glaives very often, I'd be curious to get your thoughts below. Do you think these changes on paper are likely to make you want to use glaives more often? Give us your thoughts in the comment section. Next up though, we move on to other archetypes, and firstly, for auto rifles, their damage will be increased against minor combatants by 10%, and the idea is to narrow the gap in effectiveness between SMGs and auto rifles, while maintaining the health of each of those classes of weapons. Again, that will affect all autos in the game, whether they're legendary or exotic. The same will apply to sniper rifles, where they're increasing PvE damage with a flat buff of 15%, and so whether that's legendary snipers or exotics, things like Whisper of the Worm potentially could be interesting, as they are all going to see that 15% damage increase. In general though, before we move on to exotics, Bungie have said a small update includes that they've changed Drang and Zhali's Bane animations to load ammo at the correct point in the animation, so those should feel a little bit less janky now. Then for exotic hand cannons, one of the big ones that's been outlined is a rework to Thorn and a new exotic catalyst. So from Season 23 onwards, picking up a Remnant can overflow the magazine up to 40 rounds maximum, so a Thorn with 40 rounds in the mag is pretty wild. And then the catalyst additionally provides plus 20 range, plus 10 stability, and getting kills or picking up a Remnant grants additional range, handling, and mobility. So with the base buff and the catalyst in tow, Thorn is certainly going to feel pretty solid. Another that will be interesting is a buff for the Vex Mythoclast though, and they're increasing damage versus minor red bar combatants by 10%, then for bosses it'll increase by 25%. Of course Vex also has the linear firing mode, so that could be most beneficial there. Plus, champion damage is increased by 200% when in linear fusion rifle mode. So that could potentially result in Vex Mythoclast being pretty solid for some of the endgame content, and following some of the changes we've had over the past couple of seasons, I think it's safe to say Vex Mythoclast will need that. Then one of the more controversial but expected changes will be for Osteostriga, and Bungie have said they're removing the SMG damage bonus scaler that was affecting poison damage, which also brings Osteostriga poison down to match standard necrotic grip poison, although they say as an exotic it will still deal 40% bonus damage against minors. And obviously one of the main benefits of Osteostriga has been that inflated poison damage, so it'll certainly be toned back a bit by that update. Give us any thoughts you have about that down below. And then for Salvation's Grip, they say they've placed a speed limit on the detonation when damaging stasis crystals, which will help prevent the detonation from being able to shatter too many crystals on a single frame, which sometimes results in a player being kicked to orbit with error codes. So that one's more about error prevention, I suppose. However, there will be a handful of changes to weapon perks for Season 23 as well. And for Danger Zone, Bungie have announced that we'll see a small change to how it works on rocket launchers, but they don't give us any specific details. They say we'll figure it out for ourselves when Season 23 drops, which is interesting. Although for Heavy Grip, they say they discovered a bug that was slightly increasing incoming flinch, which wasn't intended. Plus for Precision Instrument, the difference between the base version and the enhanced version of the perk was barely noticeable. So they've increased Enhanced Precision Instrument's damage bonus at maximum stacks from 26% to 30%, which just slightly improves the benefit of using the enhanced version of that perk. And then for Kinetic Tremors, Bungie are making the activation requirements more consistent across different archetypes. So for Pulse Rifles, the common version is reduced from 12 to 11, and the enhanced increases from 9 to 10. Then for non-burst sidearms, common is reduced from 12 to 8, with enhanced reduced from 9 to 7. So they are simply adjusting how Kinetic Tremors is activated on weapons. And so those are the bulk of the actual weapon tuning changes coming for Season 23. In addition to that though, they've confirmed that there will be a mid-season tuning patch next season, and in that update they'll be looking at bow tuning for PvP, so we're going to get more changes on that front, plus there'll be additional weapon tuning for Checkmate aimed at promoting better diversity of weapons. And a small side note here is that in that conversation they also confirmed that much further down the road, probably around the final shape timeline, but Necrochasm will be getting a buff, and they'll also be creating a new catalyst called One for Thrall, which grants a moderate period of increased damage, range, and aim assist after you damage 3 enemies in quick succession. So Necrochasm will eventually get some fairly significant changes potentially there, but there'll also be buffs to Truth, Colony, and Dead Man's Tale, as well as a substantial inventory buff for heavy grenade launchers. Although, those are changes that will happen beyond Season 23. The only other change we currently know about, which is worth keeping in mind, isn't related to tuning, but is related to acquiring certain weapons, and there'll be gunsmith focusing starting, where we'll be able to target particular Soros, Hake, Weist, and Omolon weapons using gunsmith engrams. And to some of Banshee's featured rewards, we'll be switching up a little bit, and we'll also get new ways to acquire gunsmith engrams. So as well as ranking up gunsmith reputation, Lost Sector completions will have a chance to drop them, and that'll be a 20% drop rate on normal, 40% on Solo and Platinum Legend Lost Sectors, and 60% on Master Lost Sectors. Plus, free roam world chests will have better chances to drop them at 20%. So, of course, while it isn't related to tuning, it'll certainly affect acquisition of certain rewards in the game. For today though, guys, that's what we currently know about weapon changes coming up later in November. So, give us your thoughts on any of them down below, and I figured as news starts rolling out for the new season, it'll be worth recapping these to make it a bit easier for players to track some of the upcoming changes. So I hope the video has been useful, and if it has, a rating below really does help us out on the channel. If you want to be kept up to date with more Destiny news and goings on over there at Bungie, I'll always keep the channel posted, so get subscribed and hit the bell icon to get notified when new content goes live. Otherwise though, as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and whatever you get up to, I hope you guys have an awesome day.